Welcome! This video contains an introduction, an interview so you can gain deeper understanding of the subject from spirit level, and a group frequency calibration so you can start to clear the frequency distortion patterns around this topic. Enjoy! Hi everyone, my name is Cheong and I'm here with my co-host Dennis Kelly. In these next two videos, we're going to be discussing the two things that will trip you up the most: the ego mind and the pain body. Now, these two things will keep us wallowing in self-sabotage, drama, and keep us stuck. And they are so intrinsic to us that we are blind to them and often blindsided by them. So in these next two videos, we're going to discuss exactly what these are so we can start to notice them and gain some distance from them so they don't subconsciously run us so much. And then we can use them eventually as leverage to be our greatest teachers. So let's jump right in. Dennis, what's your first question?
Well, I'll tell you what, Karen, I think my first question would be, this ego mind thing. There's volumes of books written about the ego.
Yes.
So is the ego a bad thing?
That's an awesome question. It's not. It doesn't have to be. Okay. So your ego is really this thing that chatters and compares everything to everything else. So our minds are actually constructed to compare things to each other. Right? And to create figure, so you can understand what is safe in our world. Like, is this this versus this versus that, and to map things. Right? That's what our minds do. They constrain information so that we can make choices and decide. The ego gets involved when we start to think, oh well, we should have it this way. It should be this way. That's the shoulding coming in. Right? That comes in. And as you write, I mean, there are volumes written about the ego mind, and I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. It's just that when it gets distorted and out of control and we start to think that we are it, that it becomes really disruptive. It's also the judgy part of us. It's called the judgy part of us.
So we need to have discernment.
Correct.
We need to be able to evaluate options as we go through life.
Yes.
So the mind, we need the mind.
Yes, it's a helpful tool. It's a required tool.
And so I just, the definition of the ego, and you're saying it's not a bad thing. So we've talked about spirit, and we've talked about thoughts, and we've talked about will, and the mind, and now we've got the ego. And I guess I'm just trying to process all that. And where does the ego fit in to all this?
So I'm going to probably answer it differently than you might think. So from my perspective, the mind and the ego are actually slightly different. From my perspective, I'm not saying that the volumes of the books are suggesting. I'm just saying from my perspective. So the mind is what I mentioned to you. It's actually a required tool in order to function in the world and to assess things and to move forward. Okay, we need to plan things. We need to move about our days. Right? So obviously we are in the world. The ego is the part of us that feels like it needs to compare in order to be better than someone else, in order to feel powerful, better, loved, worthy, or whatnot. So that's the part of us that is talking all the time to us. It's our inner critic. It's the thing that judges. That, to me, is the ego.
So I heard a couple key words there. Comparison.
Yeah.
And as soon as we start the comparison game,
yes,
it goes downhill.
It's downhill.
It's downhill.
Yeah.
And so the other word that you brought out was judgment. Mm-hmm. So I start to compare, and then I start to pass judgment.
That's right.
And something I'm really good at is passing judgment on myself.
Yes.
And so could you help me with how could I operate differently without being so judgmental of myself and so critical of myself?
Yeah. So the first thing is to realize that we are not our thoughts.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Whoa, whoa.
I know.
Karen, we were doing so good. We were doing so good. And now all of a sudden, I am not my thoughts.
I know. Oh, I'm going to throw an doozy at you. We're not our emotions either.
No emotions, no,
Okay,
no
we'll
thoughts.
talk about that in another segment. But let's stick with this.
Well, we got
our thoughts.
Oh my.
Right. So we're not our thoughts. We're not. Thoughts are actually, thoughts are just things that they're actually a collective thoughts. And we just tap into them and we tune into them, and that's what we bring in and we think are ours. They're actually also formed very much by distortion patterns, mostly from our lineage, where we think often the same thoughts as our parents and our culture and our religion, because that's what we're encultured to think. So our thoughts, if you really think about them, aren't really ours. They're actually belonging to someone else. So what happens is that we have these ideals within our culture of what perfection is and what we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to achieve and all this sort of stuff. And there are these levels of perfection, let's call it perfection, or ideal standards, which often, I'm not sure who they're constructed by, but they're not necessarily very natural or even, in my mind, very desirable. So we are constantly internally judging ourselves against these standards that were imposed on us or given to us by something external to us that we're not even necessarily even aware of, because they've just become so part of who we are, and they've come through these distortion patterns in our lineage and our cultures and in our religions and our schools and whatever, they're just pervasive in our media even. And so we become prisoners to them in a way. They're very binding because we just believe that is true.
Wow. So I've got to back up here a little bit. So you made the statement that we technically are not our thoughts.
Correct.
And did you say there's kind of an ocean of thoughts, and we just kind of connect to that, and we download those?
Yeah, and we repeat them over and over and over again. Yep.
That kind of fit with our program. And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is to become aware of those.
Exactly.
And then realize that it's a lot of and so I wish to rid myself of that.
Yes.
So am I trying to quiet my mind? Am I trying to...
That's a great question.
Am I trying to stop my mind? Yeah. Am I trying to just live as a zombie?
Well, I would not want to live like a zombie, but I get your point. So it's interesting because there's a lot of spiritual practices which is about quieting or negating the mind, like it needs to stop. So your mind is going to talk to you all the time. It's its job. It's supposed to talk to you. It's going to be chattering all the time. We can, however, reduce its speed, even though I talk fast. We can reduce its speed. We can turn down the volume. We can even mute it sometimes. And we can also realize that it's just talking. It's okay. It just is. So the point is not to go into like Zen stillness at all times. That does not have to be your goal. Okay? It does not. Some people can achieve that. Yeah. A lot of us can achieve it for periods of time. That's okay, that's wonderful. And some of us will always just have our minds with us. That's okay too. It's about realizing that it's just your mind talking to you. So it's about distinguishing yourself from your ego mind, distinguishing and then noticing where you have judgment, where you are constantly criticizing self or other, and just noticing that. And what will happen is, as a natural consequence of noticing those things, we start to gain distance from them and then ask, where did this even come from? Yeah. Is it even really me? And the answer is no. It's very, very easy to still. I mean, there's all these books about stilling the mind and all these practices. Really, it's as simple as, well, we can do it together. Just take a deep breath. Okay. So now, just drop into your heart. Into the still darkness of your heart. And really just imagine, see, sense, or feel, or become aware of your heart. Its beat, the blood pumping through it. The darkness inside your heart. And I just mean absent of light. And now just take another deep breath there. And release when you're ready. And open your eyes. So you may have noticed that if you're very present in the physical sensation of your heart, or just being in your heart, that you likely were not thinking. Were you?
Very few thoughts. Yeah.
It's like everything's just slowed right on down.
Yep.
Right. So this is where the body can become really, really instrumental, because if you become very, very aware of your body, like, oh, I can feel the sensation of my second big toenail. Oh, yeah, there it is. There's my second toenail, or whatever, not the big toe, the one next to it. Or somewhere obscure, like your earlobe, or I don't know, like, the back of your wrist. If you really focus on it and you become very, very, very aware of it, you actually stop thinking, because all you're doing is exploring and becoming very aware of that part of your body. So it's actually very easy to slow your mind down by becoming very aware of your body. That's all. Or if you prefer not your body, you can become very aware of the carpet fibers or the tile. And you just like zoom right into the tile. Be like, whoa. It's like kind of becoming stoned, but you're not stoned, right? You're just like looking at the tile and you're like, wow, check out all the details of the tile. And you become very absorbed with the tile or the carpet fiber or the chair or whatever. And once you do that, all the other thoughts drop away, especially if you're not judging yourself for being very consumed with the sofa or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right? So it's actually quite easy to use your surroundings or your body to not think, because you just make something else more relevant, more predominant.
So as I quiet the mind,
Yeah.
what is the impact on the ego? What is the relationship between these thoughts, this activity?
Yes.
And now, I'm learning to quiet the mind.
Yeah.
And it feels wonderful. And it just, becoming aware of the body and its magnificence. What impact does that have on the ego?
Well, there's just less room for it. So the mind, okay, so we are going to distinguish now between the mind and the ego, because we're going this way. So the mind is the thing that's, what I would say, I'm not talking about everyone else's definition, just from my perspective, that the mind is the thing that talks to us, right? So it's talking all the time, it's chattering, right? It's like this, I have to do this, blah, blah, blah. The ego to me is when it's the judgy part.
That's kind of the separation of the mind and the ego.
To me. The way I'm going to talk about it.
Ego
is the judgy part, the comparison part, the one that's always like you're less than, not good enough, not worthy, not lovable enough, not whatever enough, you're not enough, not enough, not enough. Or they are not enough. Or they should be doing something. Or why aren't they whatevering? Or whatnot. Why isn't it this way? That's kind of the judgmental part of it, as opposed to just a pure thought. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So one has a judgment kind of quality to it, as the other one is just thinking, right? So to me, that's the mind. So to me, that's the difference. And so how it helps, I think your question initially was, how does quieting the mind help with the ego? Well, when mind gets slow, everything slows. Both of those things slow down. There's just not much room for the chatter, whether it just be like pure mind chatter or ego judgment, right? Because you're not consumed with this part of anything, really. And if you go into nature, it can be even more powerful, because if you've ever noticed, even walking on the beach, everyone's often in a very good mood when they're on the beach, because they're on the sand, they're barefoot often, right? And they're walking in the water, or they're in the water, and they get to be in a space where the frequencies are very pure and of the earth, and everything in our earth, down to the smallest grain of sand, every fiber in a tree, every cell in your body holds all the information of all that is. So when you're in the presence of nature, especially when it's like much bigger than you. You can slow down and feel that. We as humans, because we're part of all of this and we're of the earth also, we can allow ourselves to drop into this greater than us, to still, to just be quiet. And it allows, if you've noticed, when you're in nature, you tend to be more in your body, because you're, hiking or walking or just sitting even.
Yeah.
Then you can just be, and you can watch the clouds. Like, you'll allow yourself, or at least I should say myself, I will allow myself to just watch the sky. And it's fascinating. I can sit and watch the sky for hours. I find it fascinating. And I kind of get lost in it. And that allows for that ability. And then there's really no thinking. I might think, oh, that cloud kind of looks like an eagle, or whatnot. But then that will be the last thought I have for a series of minutes. So it's easy, if we go to nature, to reduce the amount of mind chatter and ego mind stuff that we have.
I have the feeling in our society we put a lot of value or a lot of worth on the intellect.
Yes.
Which is
the mind
and all those thoughts.
Yep.
Some are very powerful.
Absolutely.
But, that gap between the thoughts
is really, really important.
Is really where the excitement and the joy
Yes.
and the happiness and the abundance and the potential is.
Yes. And do you know why that gap is so important? Do you know why? It's because it's in that gap that we experience our true nature, which is indestructible consciousness. It is in the gap between thoughts that we experience our nature as indestructible consciousness.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so that's the power of that. And a lot of people actually are very afraid of being still. They're terrified of it.
Yeah.
And as a former hyper-doer, I can understand that. And in that stillness, there's so much expansion. It's in the stillness, it's infinite. In a moment of stillness, there can be infinite expansion. And it's really beautiful because we are indestructible consciousness, infinite, indestructible consciousness. And therefore, in a mere second, everything can change, right? From this doing chatter, to nothing. It's possible.
Yeah. So just kind of reflecting back on previous sessions, as we talked about accountability, we talked about awareness, and so when you said a lot of people are extremely scared or fearful of silence.
Yes.
Because what I have to do is I have to look, and
Yeah.
it's like, wow.
Yeah, I have to look in.
And I have to feel
Yes.
with this body.
Yes.
And that could be scary.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
can be absolutely terrifying. And
Yeah.
there are people who spend their entire lives avoiding all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the will and the ego and the mind, it's all connected.
Oh, absolutely.
It's all related.
Yep.
And so just kind of going back to a question that I've asked you before in other sessions is, where do you come in if I come to you and I've got a lot of chatter, or I'm very much aware that I'm very judgmental, and it seems like everybody is. So
Yeah.
it's no big deal. So,
Everyone's doing it.
yeah. So how could you help me?
Yeah. So a lot of the judgment and the mental chatter comes from distortion patterns. As we remove distortion patterns, a natural consequence of that is that the mind stills more and the judgment becomes less required in order for us to feel good about ourselves, because we start to, as we release these distortion patterns, have a sense of more of our own sense of completeness, of wholeness, of our own brilliance. And therefore, there is no requirement to be better than anyone else. There's no requirement for things to be any other way than the way they are, because it doesn't matter. Because we have this sense of completion in ourselves. It's irrelevant. And so that is a natural consequence of the distortion patterns being removed.
So I have a sense or a feeling that probably my greatest desire in life
Yeah.
is to be at peace with myself.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah.
And so it sounds like you could help me with that, though, as far as releasing these distortions.
Yes, absolutely.
That are creating a lot of craziness for me.
Yes.
A lot of chatter,
Yes.
a lot of,
Yep.
you know.
And a lot of the judgment comes from lineage patterns. It's like they're not even ours.
Yeah.
There are our parents, our parents' parents, their parents' parents, like all of those people have their own distortions around judgment and what they think is appropriate and right and good and acceptable and, desirable and all that stuff, and what is bad, conversely, and not acceptable and should be avoided. But if you can remove all those distortion patterns, then that sort of goes out the window. And we think that it's us. We really do. But once we release the distortion patterns from that lineage, that stuff dissolves. And then you start to realize, like, geez, like what else isn't mine? A lot. Yeah. Yeah.
It's exciting.
It's
very
totally
exciting. Yeah. I'll tell you what, I loved your little section there about nature. Mm-hmm. Because, you go out to the ocean, you go out to the mountain, to the river, to the forest, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to be judgmental.
Oh, it is.
I mean, there's nothing to judge.
No.
It's all perfect.
It's all perfect. Yeah. And it just is.
Yeah.
What are you going to judge a tree?
Oh, you got to be greener, you got to be taller, you got to be, it's like...
the stars should be brighter.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you could go there.
So I really like that. And, it is that tremendous sense that we get when we step into nature. Yeah. It's just being totally, in line with the laws of nature.
Totally. Yeah. And it's that frequency. And even if you're working in an office, for example, and you feel the mind chatter like really going up and you're like, oh, I wish this person were doing this and this teammate's doing whatever and my boss is blah, right? Yeah. One easy thing to do is just go to a window and look at the sky.
Just open up.
Yeah, and just look at the sky. That can break, it can be a pattern interrupt where you can just allow yourself to look at the sky. Even if it's like your view is like this big, you're like, oh, I'm in New York City, I can see this much of the sky. So just look at the sky. Yeah. Or even if you have a plant, look at the plant and go into the cells of the plant, because that cell of that plant holds all the mystery and all that is in it. It's amazing.
The whole universe.
All the universes are in that plant.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen, could you help me? I hear so often when I look at your video or your website, GFC. Exactly what is that?
A GFC is a group frequency calibration, which looks a lot like a guided meditation on a particular topic. And what I'm doing is I'm helping you to remove the distortion patterns of that particular topic. And because you're coming together as a mastermind in a group to connect to pure source even more and to clear the distortion patterns of this particular topic, what happens is a tremendous amount of momentum starts to happen because of the energetic of the entire group, and each individual is able to move faster and ascend higher than they could have on their own. Welcome everyone. This is the Group Frequency Calibration, or GFC, on the ego mind. So let's begin by taking 3 deep breaths together into your solar plexus. And so your solar plexus is between your belly button and the edge of your sternum, or the bottom of your sternum, where your ribs meet in front of your body. So taking a deep inhale in, holding it for a second or two before releasing it. On your second breath, you're going to inhale, becoming very aware of how your weight is distributed, either on your sits bones as you sit, on your back, as you lie down, or just the points where your body meets whatever is supporting you. And then holding your breath for at least 1 to 2 seconds longer than you did your previous breath. And this time, after you exhale, please hold the voided breath out for at least 2 to 3 seconds. Inhaling in, holding for at least 1 to 2 seconds longer than you did your previous breath, and then exhaling fully whenever you're ready on your own time, and holding out the voided breath for at least 1 to 2 seconds longer than you did your previous breath. Good. And whenever you're complete with those breaths, breathe in from your belly button all the way to your heart space. Yeah. So for those of you who are new, please note that I'm working on you at the group, subgroup, and individual levels. And as I'm speaking to you, I'm already working on you. And what is happening currently is the mastermind is starting to gel. So the mastermind is when 2 or more individuals come together as a group with a common intention. In this case, it is the highest purpose possible, or the highest intention possible, which is to connect to pure source even more. So as a result, it is our highest and best versions of our highest selves that meet together. And as a result, we have incredible momentum as a group. Taking another deep breath in between your belly button and your heart space. Becoming very aware of this space, and if it helps for you to imagine a tube between your belly button and your heart space, please do that. And just become aware of the muscle, the flesh, in this space as you breathe in to this area. And just note, for those of you who are new, that I will be making sounds on my end. So I will exhale sharply, I will yawn, even though I'm not tired, I will snap occasionally, and you might also hear me hum. So just note that this is how I move the distortions at this point in time, or remove them specifically. It likely will change, but that's the current way I remove them. So you can use this as an opportunity to strengthen your own focus as you hear sounds on my end. So the first frequency distortion pattern that we're going to remove as you breathe between your belly button and your heart space is the distortion pattern around rigid belief. And in this particular case, this is the belief around being right. So we are human, so we obviously like to believe that we're right. It's part of our mind's function in allowing us to proceed in the world, to go into action. If you were in indecision or believed you were wrong, you wouldn't go into action. So obviously this is a required thing. However, this is a distortion. And when it becomes distorted, there becomes an attachment to what we believe is correct and right, and that others are wrong, and therefore we judge them for it or hold it against them or whatnot. And sometimes we bind so strongly to what it is that we believe is correct that we bind ourselves. Okay, and there is actually no right or wrong, really. It's just a mental idea, a mental construct. So it prevents us from being open to new things and from actually growing into or becoming what it is that we want. So let's just remove this distortion pattern so that you can have more ease and move more quickly into what it is that you desire. And for at least 70% of you, this is an extremely strong pattern, okay? Whether you'd like to admit it or not. And just note that if I say something that resonates with you, then it's likely you. And if I say something that you feel very strongly couldn't possibly be you, then chances are it is you. So please, or at least I invite you to be open to that possibility and to examine that without judgment. Just notice it. So, and right behind this distortion pattern is that of, again, it's another nuance, or it's a slightly different distortion pattern, and yet it is a distortion pattern of very, not only set beliefs, but rigid conclusions, assumptions, and just thought pattern. So it's like similar, like you have a repetitive way of thinking or seeing the world. And if you have challenges to that, then from whatever perspective you hold that, you tend to get a little bit anywhere from flustered to irritated to annoyed to angry. Okay, so depending on who you are, that's the spectrum. So just notice if that's you as you breathe between your belly button and your heart space. So these distortion patterns are coming from lineage, from religion, and also culture. So it's kind of a triple whammy here. And it's very binding. And you have to ask yourself why it's so important to be so attached to these things. Is it possible that there is more than you know? Or that you're aware of? Good. So let's do this. As you breathe in from your belly button to your heart space, let's ask ourselves the question: how can I connect only to pure source even more? That question again is, how can I connect only to pure source even more? Or, if you prefer, how can I become even more aware of my connection only to pure source? How can I become even more aware of my connection only to pure source? Whichever of those two resonates with you is perfectly fine. As you breathe from your belly button to your heart space, or imagine, see, sense, feel, or become aware of that space. And as you are aware of that space, imagine that this space becomes brilliant, gets brighter, more expansive, as you connect even more to pure source here in your body. And what I'm doing on the back end is increasing your native bandwidth. Okay? So just amplifying what is already natural to you. Yeah. There we go. Very good. So now please breathe from the base of your sternum. Okay, so there's a fleshy point just after the base of your sternum, which is where your ribs meet in front of your body, right? That fleshy point all the way into your heart space, please. So this frequency distortion pattern that we are now removing is that of an overactive mind. Okay? And for some of you, at least 25% of you, your mind is not only overactive, it's like hyperactive. So it's always talking to you in like louder and louder tones. Okay? And for a very small subgroup of you, there are other things that speak to you other than your mind. And we'll talk about that some other time. All you have to do is breathe between the base of your sternum and your heart space. Nice. So now please breathe into your heart space. So imagine, see, sense, feel, or become very aware of your heart space. This next distortion pattern has to do with what I'll call false pride. So it's when you project to the world that you've got it, like you've handled it, you know what you're doing, you're on top of things, you're advanced spiritually, whatever it is. But yet inside you know that you're exactly the opposite. You don't have things. It's kind of a mess. You yearn for spiritual connection and you don't feel like you have it. You feel disconnected, whatever it is, right? So there's a disassociation between what you project into the world and who you feel you are inside, okay? So this fuels the ego mind. Feeds it. Not in a good way. All right? Just makes it louder because it feels it needs to project all this stuff and take a more defended stance. So let's breathe into the heart space as I help you release this distortion pattern. There. Okay. So now if you can imagine, see, sense, feel the very center of your solar plexus. Okay, so the midpoint between your belly button and the edge of your sternum, wherever that is for you. Okay, so whatever you imagine is perfect. So just find that point, right? It doesn't have to be exactly precise, but just imagine it. And wherever that is perfect. Taking a deep breath in to this point. So this distortion pattern has to do with defendedness, okay? So it's like you feel like you have to defend your position, defend your mind, to defend, it's just like a defended against others stance. So that's interesting. If they're just thoughts, why do you have to defend them? Is it really your thoughts that you're defending, or your attachment to your thoughts? What are thoughts anyway? Taking a deep breath into the very center of your solar plexus. And let's imagine softening into this point. Whatever that means for you, imagine softening here. Soften even more into this point. What if all thoughts are true? What if no thoughts are true? What if some of them are true? Is it all possible? So instead of getting stuck in your mind as I ask these questions, just watch yourself and soften into the very center of your solar plexus. Notice if you feel like you have to engage with my questions. Soften even more. Taking another deep breath into the center of your solar plexus. So this next distortion pattern has to do with, let me see, how do I say this? With believing your thoughts, okay? So, of course, we have mind chatter all the time. Our minds talk to us all the time. Who's to say that it's right? Where did these ideas come from? What if there are better questions that we can ask? As you breathe into the center of your solar plexus. Good. Take a deep breath, or imagine, see, sense, or feel from your belly button into your heart space again. So now please imagine, see, sense, or feel, or become aware of your spirit body, which is arm's length around you. Arm's length distance from you. It's more accurate. In a sphere all around you. Okay, so arm's length distance, a sphere all around you. And you stand in the middle of the sphere. So now imagine that around the sphere there are all these black ropes. And they wrap around the sphere. So now, as I work on you, you're going to imagine that from the top of the sphere, melting down on the sides, the ropes start to dissolve or burn away or melt away. All the way from the top, down the sides, all the way to the fattest point in the sphere. All the way down to the other point, the bottom point of the sphere. Until it's all dissolved. Please note, this is much more than a visualization. We are clearing the binding of your ego mind around your spirit body. And what I'm doing on my end is working on spirit level to release even more from you. Taking a deep breath in. And then releasing with a very long and loud exhale. Good. Now I'm going to leave you here for as long as you'd like. I look forward to meeting you on the next GFC.